So this brings us to the focus of our attention today, Stephen Watson, buried over here, the third surviving son of Winthrop and Abigail Watson. Stephen was 17 when he enlisted in May of 1780 into Captain Penniman's company of Colonel Henry Dearborn's New Hampshire Regiment, which was hired by Exeter's neighboring town of Brentwood, New Hampshire. Colonel Dearborn was no small figure. After the Revolutionary War, he became the Secretary of War for President Thomas Jefferson, and the city of Dearborn, Michigan is named for him. Anyway, Watson marched with his company to West Point, New York, and from there went to the vicinity of Orange, New Jersey, just east of Morristown, where General George Washington had his headquarters. Watson's unit was likely sent to Orange in response to a British attack against the American outpost in Westchester County, New York, early in 1780, which resulted in about 50 American casualties, with 75 captured. The British were attempting to regain control of northern New Jersey, and in June of 1780, the Continental Army camp at Morristown was attacked. The thrust was halted at the Battle of Connecticut Farms, and another failed attempt a few weeks later ended British ambitions in New Jersey. Watson's unit remained in the area throughout the summer and fall of 1780, and on the first day of January 1781, after 7 months of service, Stephen Watson was discharged and returned to his home of Exeter, New Hampshire. Is that good enough?
That's wonderful.
You want more?
Yeah, a little more.
Okay.
That's okay. You're doing so well.
Stephen Watson remained in Exeter until 1786, when he and his brother Daniel moved to Epping, New Hampshire. It was there 2 years later that Stephen married Mary Fogg from a local Epping family shortly after their marriage. Stephen and Mary moved to the part of Rochester, New Hampshire that became Milton in 1802. Seemingly restless, or maybe taking advantage of business opportunities, the family then moved to Wakefield, New Hampshire, where they stayed for a few years, but again they moved back to Milton. 2 decades after returning to Milton in 1825, Stephen and Mary, with their younger children, made their final move here to Acton, Maine. We are most fortunate that in April 1832, when about 70 years old, Stephen applied for a pension based on his military service in the Revolutionary War. He no longer had his discharge papers from 51 years earlier, and he needed somebody's testimony to vouch for his service. For this, he traveled 55 miles to Bartlett, New Hampshire, that's up in Coos County, to get a statement from fellow soldier Richard Gayland in August 1832. This deposition, along with his own statements, was sufficient for the War Department, and he was allowed a pension in the amount of $30 per year. Mary died 10 years after the family arrived in Acton in 1835, after which Stephen lived another 11 years, dying in October of 1846 at the age of 84. Stephen and Mary had 8 known children, the oldest 5 of whom were adults when the family moved to Acton. But the younger 3 children came here with their parents. In fact, their youngest child, Daniel Watson, married a woman named Eliza J. Wood, and she died at an early age, and she was buried here with her in-laws. As happens many times, the first spouse to die gets the gravestone, but the other does not. Stephen had the means to make sure that a fine stone was placed at Mary's grave, but by the time Stephen died at the age of 84, either the remainder of the family had left the area or didn't have the financial means to mark his grave, or maybe they just didn't have the interest. But at least they placed field stones at the head and foot of his grave. And let me tell you, once I got in touch with those 2 gentlemen, the ball started rolling very quickly. And I want to say that they are the reason that this is happening right now. So could we give a round of applause for Steve? Steve is standing right over there in the green shirt. Is Ron here? Can you make it back from... Oh, there's Ron in the red shirt in the back. You made it from Shapley days. That's great. I'm so glad. So, anyway, that's why we're all gathered here today, because I'll tell you, when I came here a year ago, the cemetery was all grown up in saplings. This tombstone was buried, his tombstone was tilted, and I mean, most people didn't know that there was even a cemetery here, other than the property owners. In fact, the lady across the street this morning said, you know, she came out of her house and said, I didn't know there was a cemetery over there. Well, anyway, it's been a well-preserved treasure all these years. So, one more person before I relinquish the stand is I would also like to thank the property owners. Guys, there were junk cars. This place was just covered because you can see this place is used as a business, okay? But they have really bent over backwards to clean this place up, to make it, clear everything out around the cemetery. So, give thanks to Mr. Robert Mead and his son, Bob Mead. I don't know. So, anyway, that concludes my talk. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and I'll hand it back over to Mr. Wallace. Thank you.
Thank you. That was just an unbelievable history lesson as to how this all went together and how we're here today. So thank you so much for doing all that. Now we're at the point of our program where we're going to unveil the stone. So Oliver Arnold and David Watson Kruger.
Point by Lux.
Present.
Present Lux.
We'll place the American flag on the stone, on the grave.
In the holder? In the holder.
The little brass
Over here.
holder to the left.
The holder.
Oh, this.
There you go.
That's easier.
That's perfect.
Point by Lux. Shoulder by Lux.
Pastor Henry Burfield will give us our dedication prayer.
Almighty God, remember before you today faithful hearts, men and women of our country, in the days of lift their honor, their fortunes, and their lives, as we enjoy the liberty they fought for. We especially recognize the service of Stephen Watson, whose memorial monument we dedicate today. We thank you, Lord, for all the veterans who through their service have made this country strong. May they be models in our lives. Thank you for the faith you instill in men. Help us, O Lord, to continue the work you have begun in our land. Amen.
Point. Shoulder by Lux. Point by Lux.
Arm!
Present Lux.
Hefflock, face! Face! Aim! Fire! Face! Aim! Fire! Face! Aim! Fire! That's right. Face! Reset! Arm!
Point by Lux. Shoulder by Lux.
recognize Laura Titinsky, is that correct? Playing the taps for us. And Al Halliday and Bill Ferrigno for the bagpipes. I was never a veteran of a war of any kind in the military service, but I can understand how you feel when you hit taps. I'm a 40-year veteran of a fire department. I've been on the fire department my whole life. When I hear Amazing Grace play, as you can tell, it just tears my hat up. So, thank you so much for that. Appreciate it. Now I have the benediction of Pastor Henry. That's all.
Almighty God and Father, we thank you for this opportunity to come together to honor our veterans, past, present, and future. As we return back to our work and home, you may be with us on our journey and in the days to come. You are our light and our song, the strength of our lives. To you be glory in the ages to come. We praise in Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior.
Fire of the colors.
Boys, silence.
Present arms!
Present.
Fire the colors! Order! Arms!
Boys, silence. Shoulder, silence.
Thank you very much. That concludes, I believe, our program for the day. Thank you all for coming. It's really been a great ceremony. So, thank you. Order.
Excuse me, how many people totally are buried here?
3.
3, okay.
1,
2,
2,
3, okay.
Husband, wife, daughter-in-law.
Okay, husband, wife.
Their youngest son's wife died at a very young age, and she was buried here in the cemetery. I see she was buried 10 years after he was, so the family was still around. Why they didn't put a tombstone at his grave, I have no idea. You know, but anyway.
So the new tombstone, that was just, he never had one.
He never had. That's
Wow.
why this whole ceremony today,
Yes.
to dedicate the new tombstone for him. So,
The wives both died young.
huh?
The wives both died young.
She wasn't that young. She was in her 60s, I think.
That's young.
64, yeah, she was 64.
Yeah.
All right.
She
Considering
died
those
young,
times, yeah.
and which means
Yes.
usually in childbirth. That's
Yeah,
when
yeah,
when
yeah.
women died
Yes.
young. So.
I did.
You all set, Bob? Thank you.
Okay.